Have you ever faced a moment where loyalty demanded everything from you? Picture this: a young widow named Ruth, her world shattered by loss, faces a choice. She can return to the familiar comforts of Moab or step into the unknown, following her grieving mother-in-law to a foreign land. Her decision: where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. It's not just a pledge. It's a leap of faith, an act of loyalty that will echo through eternity and place her in the very genealogy of Jesus Christ. Ruth's story speaks to those moments, showing us that faithfulness, even when it's costly, opens the door to God's incredible plans. Ruth's story is not one of kings or battles. It's the story of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges, grief, poverty, and uncertainty. And yet, through quiet faithfulness and unwavering love, Ruth's life is transformed into a legacy of redemption. In a world that often feels fractured and self-centered, this ancient tale reminds us of the power of sacrificial love, the beauty of loyalty, and the providence of a God who works through every detail of our lives. By the end of this video, you'll discover how the Book of Ruth challenges us to trust God's unseen hand, even when life feels uncertain. And if this journey inspires you, check out our Deep Bible Stories eBooks, crafted from our most popular videos to enrich your Bible study. You'll find the link in the description below. Don't forget to like this video and share it. With that being said, let's dive into the story of Ruth, a tale of loyalty, love, and redemption like you've never seen it before. Picture this: a nation lost in chaos, where the weight of brokenness presses on every heart. That was the era of the Judges, a time when moral decline and famine swept across the land. Amid this darkness, the story of Ruth emerges like a song of hope. Traditionally attributed to the prophet Samuel, this narrative was likely penned as a testament to God's faithfulness in the bleakest of times. It's a tale of a Moabite widow whose quiet faithfulness reshaped history, placing her in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Imagine the author, inspired by God, writing this story to remind the people and us that no matter how broken things seem, God's hand is always at work. Ruth's loyalty wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a declaration of hope for generations. Let's move forward and uncover how Ruth's legacy shines brighter with every verse. Picture the dry, barren fields of Moab, where the cries of the grieving seem to echo endlessly in the wind. Naomi stands amidst the dust of her shattered world, her face lined with the weight of years and loss. This isn't just a story from the past, it's the story of every person who has ever faced a season of unimaginable grief, a time when everything familiar crumbles, leaving only questions and pain. Naomi's journey to Moab began with hope. She and her husband Elimelech fled the famine in Bethlehem, seeking a better life. For a time, it seemed their choice had paid off. Her sons, Mahlon and Chilion, married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and there was the promise of a future. But in an unthinkable turn, Elimelech was taken. Then, one by one, her sons also died, leaving 3 women in the lonely shadow of widowhood. Can you imagine it? Naomi, once a wife and mother, now stripped of her identity and purpose, stands at the crossroads of despair. Her words resonate with anyone who has looked at their life and wondered where God is in the midst of the wreckage. The hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Her pain is raw, and her faith feels fragile. But even in her sorrow, Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem, the place where she once knew God's provision. She urges her daughters-in-law to stay behind, to rebuild their lives in Moab. Orpah weeps and departs, a decision we cannot fault. After all, who wouldn't choose the safer path, the one that offers a semblance of stability? But Ruth is different. She looks at Naomi with eyes full of determination and love. "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you," she says, "for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." This isn't just a declaration, it's a covenant. Ruth's words are a lifeline, a reminder that loyalty isn't always convenient, but it is powerful. Her decision to leave everything familiar, to embrace a life of uncertainty, is the kind of faith that moves mountains. Think about a time when someone's loyalty carried you through. Maybe it was a friend who stood by you during a health scare, a family member who supported you in the wake of job loss, or a mentor who believed in you when no one else did. Loyalty like Ruth's transforms lives. It reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. Naomi and Ruth's return to Bethlehem is bittersweet. The women of the town recognize Naomi but are shocked by her appearance. "Do not call me Naomi," she says, which means pleasant. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." Mara means bitter, and her words reflect a soul that feels abandoned by God. Yet, as they settle back in Bethlehem, we see the first glimmers of hope. The barley harvest is beginning, and though Naomi cannot yet see it, God's providence is at work. Through Ruth's faithfulness, redemption is on the horizon. This chapter speaks to anyone navigating their own season of loss or transition. Maybe you've felt like Naomi, returning to a place you once called home, only to feel like a stranger. Or perhaps you've been a Ruth, choosing to stay by someone's side when walking away would have been easier. Either way, their story reminds us that God's plans often unfold in the most unexpected ways, even in the midst of our brokenness. For those seeking deeper insights, our popular videos on deep Bible stories are converted to eBooks. You can find them through the link in the description. The morning air was thick with possibility, yet Ruth, the young Moabite widow, could only feel the weight of her circumstances. The fields of Bethlehem stretched endlessly before her, shimmering under the sun's unforgiving glare. Each step into this foreign land felt heavy, burdened with grief and the nagging question, what now? For Ruth, this wasn't just a field, it was a battlefield. Survival hung in the balance, not just for her, but for Naomi, her mother-in-law, who had lost everything. Ruth wasn't born into this land. She didn't belong here. Gleaning the leftover barley was an act of humility and courage, an unspoken admission of her poverty. But Ruth wasn't merely collecting grain. Every handful she gathered was a declaration of faith, a whisper to a God she barely knew but had chosen to trust. Picture yourself standing at the edge of uncertainty, faced with a challenge so immense it feels insurmountable. Perhaps it was moving to a new city where you knew no one, stepping into a job that demanded more than you thought you could give, or picking up the pieces after a devastating loss. Ruth's first steps into that field mirror our own moments of sheer bravery when we dare to step forward despite the odds. As Ruth worked under the blistering sun, her hands trembling from exhaustion, something miraculous was happening. Boaz, the owner of the field, a man of great wealth and even greater character, noticed her. "Who is this young woman?" he asked his foreman. Boaz could have ignored her. In fact, most landowners would have. She was just a gleaner, a foreigner, and a widow. Labels that marked her as insignificant in the eyes of society. But Boaz saw more than a struggling woman. He saw her faithfulness, her loyalty to Naomi, and her courage to show up when life had given her every reason to stay hidden. "Listen, my daughter," Boaz said when he approached Ruth, his voice steady and kind. "Do not go to glean in another field. Stay here with my women. I've commanded the men not to touch you." These words were more than protection. They were grace. Ruth, who had likely expected scorn or indifference, now stood under the shelter of a stranger's kindness. Have you ever experienced a moment like this? A time when someone unexpectedly extended compassion and changed the trajectory of your life? Maybe it was a teacher who saw potential in you when no one else did, or a stranger who offered a kind word that reignited your hope. Boaz's kindness wasn't just an act of generosity, it was a tangible expression of God's providence. Ruth's day didn't end with just a handful of grain. By the time she returned to Naomi, her arms were filled with an abundance she could have never anticipated. Naomi's face, etched with years of sorrow, lit up when she heard about Boaz. "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead," Naomi exclaimed. But this moment wasn't just about grain, it was about grace. It was a glimpse of God's plan unfolding in real time. The same God who had brought Ruth to Naomi and led them back to Bethlehem was now orchestrating their steps into fields of favor. Consider this. What if Ruth had stayed home that day, paralyzed by fear or doubt? What if she had given up, convinced that her story couldn't possibly end well? How often do we miss God's blessings because we hesitate to take that first step of faith? Ruth's encounter with Boaz also challenges us to look at our own lives. Are we willing to be like Boaz, extending kindness to those who feel invisible? In a world that prizes self-interest, Boaz's generosity reminds us that small acts of compassion can ripple into eternity. This chapter of Ruth's life isn't just about survival, it's about transformation. Ruth's faithfulness and courage set the stage for a legacy she couldn't have dreamed of, one that would lead to the lineage of King David and, ultimately, Jesus Christ. And isn't that how God often works? He takes our ordinary acts of obedience and weaves them into his extraordinary plan. For Ruth, gleaning barley wasn't just about feeding Naomi, it was about stepping into her destiny. As you reflect on Ruth's story, think about your own fields. What steps of faith is God calling you to take? What kindness can you extend to someone who's struggling? If this story of Ruth's unwavering faith and divine favor resonates with you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that God's plans are always greater than our circumstances. The moonlight bathed the fields in a silver glow as Ruth approached the threshing floor, her heart pounding with every step. Naomi's plan echoed in her mind. A plan so audacious it defied logic, tradition, and perhaps even her own comfort. This was more than an errand. This was an act of sheer courage, a leap of faith into the unknown. Naomi's words had been clear. Wash, put on perfume, and dress in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. Do not let Boaz know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. The simplicity of the instructions belied the magnitude of what Ruth was about to do. In her culture, approaching a man in this way was bold, almost scandalous. Yet Naomi, wise and discerning, knew that Boaz was a man of honor, a redeemer who could change both their lives forever. Can you recall a moment when you stood at the threshold of a life-altering decision? Perhaps it was a job interview, a difficult conversation, or even a confession of love. Ruth's journey to the threshing floor mirrors those moments when vulnerability and bravery intertwine, pushing us to trust in God's plan, even when it feels risky. As Ruth approached, the air was thick with the sounds of celebration. The harvest was complete, and Boaz, like the other men, had spent the evening eating, drinking, and rejoicing in the fruit of their labor. When he finally lay down to rest near the grain pile, a common practice to guard against theft, Ruth crept closer, her footsteps muffled by the soft earth. And then she did something astonishing. Quietly, she uncovered his feet and lay down. This was no ordinary act. It was a symbolic gesture, one rich with meaning. In that culture, uncovering someone's feet and lying at them was a way of asking for protection, a way of saying, "I place myself under your care." Imagine the tension in that moment. Ruth, a foreign widow, was exposing herself to rejection, misunderstanding, and perhaps even ridicule. But her boldness wasn't born of recklessness. It was rooted in faith, in Naomi's wisdom, in Boaz's character, and ultimately in God's providence. As midnight approached, Boaz stirred. Feeling the chill of the night air on his uncovered feet, he awoke, startled to find a woman lying at them. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "I am your servant Ruth," she replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." Those words, "spread the corner of your garment over me," were both an invitation and a declaration. Ruth wasn't just asking for protection, she was invoking the ancient concept of redemption. As a kinsman redeemer, Boaz had the legal and moral authority to marry Ruth, redeem Naomi's land, and secure their future. Boaz's response was as extraordinary as Ruth's proposal. Rather than reacting with anger or dismissiveness, he praised her for her loyalty and integrity. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he said. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask." In that moment, Boaz affirmed Ruth's worth and her courage. He recognized her faithfulness not only to Naomi, but to God's plan for their lives. But Boaz's integrity didn't stop there. Aware of another kinsman redeemer who was closer in relation, he vowed to resolve the matter the following day, ensuring that everything would be done honorably. Think about the boldness it takes to put your future in someone else's hands. Ruth's actions remind us that faith often requires vulnerability, a willingness to step out, speak up, and trust God's provision, even when the outcome is uncertain. Have you ever had to take a similar leap? Maybe you opened up about a deeply held dream, sought help during a crisis, or made a decision that defied logic but felt divinely led. Boaz's response also challenges us to consider how we react when someone entrusts us with their vulnerability. Do we meet them with grace and integrity, as Boaz did, or do we let fear or selfishness dictate our actions? As Ruth returned to Naomi with 6 measures of barley, a gift from Boaz, the older woman's face lit up with hope. "Wait, my daughter," Naomi said, her voice filled with quiet assurance, "until you find out what happens. For the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." This chapter is a testament to the power of boldness and the faithfulness of a God who orchestrates even the smallest details of our lives. Ruth's courage and Boaz's honor set the stage for a redemption story that would echo through generations, culminating in the lineage of Christ. For those who feel they're standing at a threshing floor moment in their lives, unsure, vulnerable, and filled with questions, take heart. Ruth's story reminds us that God is in the business of redemption, turning our acts of faith into the foundation of his plans. Consider the bold steps you may need to take in your own life. Who is God calling you to trust? What risks is he asking you to take for the sake of his greater purpose? The morning sun cast its first golden rays over the quiet town of Bethlehem, a place that seemed ordinary, yet held the echoes of extraordinary destinies. Among its stone streets and market chatter, Boaz, a man known for his honor and compassion, walked with purpose toward the city gates. Today, he wasn't just a landowner or a leader. Today, he would step fully into God's plan as a kinsman redeemer, a role that would change not only Ruth's life, but history itself. Imagine Ruth and Naomi that morning, waiting in hushed anticipation. For Ruth, a Moabite widow who had left everything behind to follow Naomi and Naomi's God, this moment carried the weight of every risk she'd ever taken. Would the man who showed her kindness in the fields now seal her redemption? Would her story of faithfulness finally find its reward? At the gate, Boaz gathered the elders, a public step required for any legal transaction. The scene was tense, yet sacred. As Boaz began to speak, he didn't waste words. Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention. But Boaz was more than strategic. He was bold. As the closer relative initially expressed interest in redeeming the land, Boaz revealed the full weight of the commitment. On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. The relative quickly declined. Redeeming the land alone was manageable. But taking on Ruth meant responsibility, sacrifice, and legacy. He removed his sandal, the symbolic act of relinquishment, and declared that Boaz could step in as the rightful redeemer. For Ruth and Naomi, this moment was nothing short of miraculous. Ruth, the foreigner, the widow, the outsider, was now embraced into Israel's community and God's covenantal promises. Have you ever found yourself in Ruth's shoes, wondering if your faithfulness, despite overwhelming odds, would ever bear fruit? Maybe it's the single mother who sacrifices her own dreams to give her child a better future, or the young professional who holds on to integrity in a cutthroat industry, even when it seems to cost them everything. Ruth's story is a testimony that God sees, honors, and rewards faithfulness in his perfect time. As Boaz redeemed Ruth, a new chapter began, not just for her, but for Naomi, for Israel, and for all of us. Their union led to the birth of Obed, the grandfather of David, whose lineage would one day bring forth the Messiah. Take a moment to let that sink in. Ruth, a Moabite widow who entered Bethlehem with little more than hope and determination, became the great-grandmother of King David. She became part of the genealogy of Jesus Christ himself. It's astonishing, isn't it? God takes the overlooked, the underestimated, and the broken, and he weaves their lives into his eternal tapestry. Ruth's story reminds us that our backgrounds, our past mistakes, and even our perceived inadequacies do not disqualify us from God's purposes. In our own lives, redemption often feels distant, hidden behind layers of pain or uncertainty. But think of those moments when someone stepped in, a friend who loaned a hand when you were drowning in bills, a mentor who saw potential in you when you couldn't see it yourself, or a community that rallied around you when you felt most alone. These glimpses of redemption are reflections of God's heart, just as Boaz was a reflection of Christ. Even Naomi's story, filled with bitterness and loss, found restoration. She who once said, "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter," now held her grandson in her arms, her heart full of joy. The women of Bethlehem celebrated, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer." For anyone who feels like they've lost too much to ever see restoration, whether it's a broken marriage, a career that derailed, or a dream that feels forever out of reach, Ruth and Naomi's story is a reminder that God's plans are never thwarted. His redemption doesn't just restore what was lost, it brings forth something even greater. What would it look like to trust God with your story? To believe that even in the waiting, in the heartbreak, he is working all things for good. Perhaps it's time to lay down the need to understand every twist and turn and simply say, Lord, I trust you to redeem this. As we close this chapter, remember that the story of Ruth and Boaz points us to the ultimate Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Just as Boaz paid the price to secure Ruth's future, Christ paid the ultimate price on the cross to secure ours. So, whether you feel like Ruth, an outsider looking in, or Naomi, weary from life's blows, take heart. Redemption is not just a possibility, it's a promise. Ruth's legacy is a challenge to us all. Are we willing to trust God with our stories, to remain loyal when it costs us something, to believe that He is writing a greater narrative than we could ever imagine? As you ponder these questions, I encourage you to take Ruth's example to heart. Trust that your faithfulness matters. Even when it feels unseen, know that God is weaving your life into His divine tapestry, just as He did with Ruth's. We've turned many of our videos into eBooks designed to deepen your walk with God. You can find them on our website. Check the link in the description below. And if you've been blessed by this journey, please like this video and share it with that friend. Let's spread the hope of Ruth's story far and wide. As you step into your own story of faith, loyalty, and redemption, remember this: stay blessed. The God who redeemed Ruth is the same God who is working in your life today, turning every choice, every challenge, and every act of faith into something beautiful and eternal.